Recently, Bill Gurley delivered a talk at a All-In conference that quickly went viral. It centered around the pressing issue of regulatory capture. As AI emerges as the next big trend, Gurley's insights are more relevant than ever. And let's dive into his perspective and my thoughts on this issue. Just a quick intro of Bill Gurley, although he doesn't really need an introduction. He was once a sell-side equity research analyst at Credit Suisse First Boston during the era when Frank Quattrone was making a reign as the king of tech IPOs. At the age of 24, he already took on lead coverage, and he was covering companies like Dell, Compaq, and Microsoft, and he was a lead analyst on Amazon's IPO. In 1996, Frank Quattrone called him, and he has heard good things about Gurley, so Quattrone wanted Gurley to come with him to Silicon Valley. Gurley met with him after figuring out how important Quattrone is. And Quattrone is still really important even to this day as a legendary investment banker. And Gurley told Quattrone that he doesn't want to do sell-side research anymore and he wanted to become a venture capitalist. And Quattrone convinced Gurley to move with him. And in exchange, Quattrone will introduce Gurley to every venture capitalist he knows in the valley. The rest is history. Gurley went on to become one of the most prominent deal makers in the venture capital world in the Silicon Valley, and today he's reported to be worth $8 billion. Some of the high-profile companies Gurley has invested in include Grubhub, Stitch Fix, Zillow, and OpenTable, which all of them at once were publicly traded. A quick interesting fact, Gurley stands at 6'9", and he played college basketball for the University of Florida Gators. George Stigler is the Nobel Prize winner in economics. He defines regulatory capture as when regulations are ultimately co-opted by the industry and tailored primarily for their own advantage. It became an issue when the interests of specific groups take precedence over the broader interests of the public, ultimately resulting in a net loss for the society. Regulatory capture often occurs through two mechanisms. One is limiting market entry. The other is ensuring price protection. And both money and people influence regulatory capture. On the money side, you have financial contributions, which typically are associated with Citizens United. So do the revolving doors that facilitate individuals transitioning between the private sector and the regulatory bodies. And I have witnessed that firsthand when working for a large financial institution. I've seen some senior executive at the company, their resumes included experience working for the very regulator that regulate that financial institution. And instead of encouraging free competition, regulators can end up boosting the incumbents and further enhance their dominance in the industry that they're trying to regulate. Bill Gurley talked about his fourth ever venture capital investment in his career. It was in a company called Tropos Networks. It operated in the Wi-Fi broadband sector, and their mission was to provide free Wi-Fi services in downtown areas all across the United States. And that was a vision that resonated with hundreds of mayors across the country who were looking to enhance public safety, boost economic development, and bridge the digital divide. However, as this development was taking place, the incumbents began flexing their political and financial muscles to protect their own interests. The lobbyists acting on behalf of these telcos and cable companies like Verizon, Comcast, and AT&T, they actually managed to outlaw citywide Wi-Fi initiatives within just 2 years. And Gurley highlighted the Telecom Act of 1996, which aimed to promote competition and foster technological progress. Instead of spurring innovation and investment, it led to actually a concentration of power in the hands of a few major players and a rapid decline in venture investment in the sector in the following decade. And this is exactly what George Stigler predicted, how landmark regulatory actions tend to benefit the largest industry players rather than enhancing competition or customer experiences. And similarly, in the aftermath of 2008 financial crisis and the implementation of Dodd-Frank, what ends up happening is the largest US banks actually grew larger, indicating that regulatory effort often falls short of their intended objectives. If you found this helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for future contents on equity research, business analysis, and career advice. The state of US healthcare system has been widely criticized. Bill Gurley offers pretty clear case studies to illustrate the issues that exist as a result of regulatory capture. During the Obama administration, there was a push to encourage the adoption of electronic health records, EHR, software. Epic System is a major private company in Wisconsin that dominated the EHR software market. And the CEO of Epic had close ties with Obama as a major donor, and she was appointed as the only corporate representative printed on the healthcare IT console. As part of Obama's American Recovery Act, an agency called ONC was created to drive EHR adoption. Under the initiative, each doctor will receive $44,000 if their practice bought EHR software. They will receive an additional $17,000 if they can prove meaningful use. And I guess even better, ONC decided that the threshold for meaningful use attestation pretty much mirrors the Epic software feature set. So Epic software became the de facto standard for compliance, and ONC got the Department of Justice to enforce compliance. What ended up happening is smaller EHR competitors received substantial fines ranging from $57 million to $155 million. If you think about any industry, a startup in that industry typically begins with a simpler product than the incumbent, try to differentiate on a feature set that really matters to the customer and does it better than the incumbent. Then it adds more features over time. Gurley's point was that the ONC regulation basically acts as a barrier to entry. Or in his own words, the regulation just put a brick wall to innovation. That basically disallowed any new player to compete with the entrenched incumbent Epic. Gurley provided a more recent example as well, specifically the rapid antigen tests, which are based on a very simple technology developed in the 1940s. It's basically a commodity. When COVID broke out, Germany heavily leaned into rapid tests. They evaluated 122 different rapid test vendors and validated 96 of them. And as a result, there was a fierce competition between the vendors for a commodity product. That was bad for the vendors, but it ultimately benefited the customer by allowing them to purchase tests for as little as 75 cents euro each. The UK followed and produced tests in such abundance and affordability that they were distributed to people's home for free. At the same time, what was happening in the US? Various players in the ecosystem resisted the adoption of rapid antigen tests. And Gurley believed that the hospitals were reluctant to adopt rapid tests because the hospitals were profiting as much from the PCR test as they were from the vaccine themselves. Furthermore, there were only 3 vendors that ultimately received approval for selling rapid tests. And it gets better. Guess what? The person at the FDA overseeing the approval of rapid test vendors, his name is Tim Stenzel. And guess where he used to work? You probably guessed it. 5 years as Chief Scientific Officer at Quidel and 4 years as a Senior Director of Medical, Regulatory, and Clinical Affairs at Abbott. That's a coincidence, right? When President Biden finally embraced antigen tests, the government chose to buy these over-engineered products from the 3 approved vendors. And honestly, the US government was probably better off buying tests from the stores in Germany and shipping them to the US. And now you know why these tests were so expensive in the US. It's really due to a lack of open competition for a commodity product. Bill Gurley's concern about regulatory capture remains incredibly relevant today. He expressed reservations about Sam Altman's proposal for a new regulatory body to establish standards for AI software before its release. Gurley's concern is Washington will be able to exert excessive control over the software industry, similar to the pharmaceutical sector. Gurley also raised the possibilities of smaller AI software startups being required to submit their code for government review and have to comply to feature sets mandated by the incumbent. Does that sound familiar? This is super topical because just last week, on October 30th, 2023, President Biden issued an executive order to establish an AI Safety and Security Advisory Board, which includes industry experts, research labs, critical infrastructure entities, and the US government. Given Gurley's remarks, he likely views this development cautiously, as it actually increases concern about excessive regulation potentially stifling AI innovation and competition. His frustration with the government's regulatory efforts is evident, because he's seeing in a lot of industries that incumbents are actively working to hinder potential disruptors. If you look at the price trends over multiple decades, technology products usually driven by intense competition often face deflationary pressure, which benefits consumers. In contrast, essential services like healthcare and education experience consistent above inflation price increases over the multiple decades. This not only harms consumers, but also has broader implications for the country's competitiveness on a global scale. So for Gurley, he's proposing several solutions to address these issues, including greater transparency in political contribution, reevaluating policies like Citizens United, and increased awareness among voters about their legislators' committee affiliations. As an investor, you should never underestimate the significance of Michael Porter's sixth force, which Porter refuses to acknowledge as a standalone force, instead argues that government forces merely impact the other 5 forces. You just need to recognize that government influences can and often do materially impact the dynamics of competition and business economics. And this perspective could enhance the understanding of competitive strategy for both professionals and amateurs alike. If you want to hear more of my take on the investment management industry, I have 2 great videos for you in the upcoming screen. I'll talk to you next time. Peace.